Cuban people is the mixture of blacks and whites. The first came from Africa, the rest from Spain. But now those groups are together, and a lot of times you can't tell if someone is black or white. To learn more about this, we went to the Yoruba Association, a bunch of people that believed in the old African religion that gathered here in this organization considered part of the civil society. Gloria Rolando is a movie director that has made several documentaries about the African heritage. She studied music and art history, an education used later to understand how the black people contributed to the history of Cuba. So, Gloria, this is a very special place.
Yes, I think so.
Because of the religion and all that. Tell me a little bit, why is it special?
Bueno, this is the Yoruba Cultural Association, and is a main center here. It's a big museum that collects the expression that the slave brought from Africa, especially those who came from Yoruba land, from Nigeria. And there are the representation like in Africa, and because it's something secret, they don't want to show, to expose, because it's something that a lot of religious people, they come here to pray, to make offerings, to do ceremonies. So maybe they want to preserve, the sequence of peace, and this is not part of the commercialization that the tourists can visit here and take photos and make a souvenir. This is a special place.
You know this topic not only because of religious reason, but in your documentaries, you try to show, I believe, a different perspective about this religion. Usually is washed as a folkloric expression.
Yes, it's a big
only,
mistake.
Like a dancing and drinking and parties. But you try to show the values of these religions, right?
And the universal values, especially. Because my first documentary, the first that I made, the name is Ogun, Forever Present. And it's amazing how this culture that never was the official culture, because even the slave were not considered, as a human being, this culture suffered too much repression, too much discrimination. And it's amazing how the people, through the collective memory, they keep all these richness until the present. So my first documentary that is dedicated to Lázaro Ross, the most important Yoruba singer that we have in Cuba, he passed away a long time ago, is an homage to these people that preserve this culture, this explanation of the world, this kind of dialogue with the nature from during many years ago.
What kind of values would you say are inevitable to mention when you talk about this religion?
For example, it's a way of interpretation of the world. It's a way to dialogue with the nature and explain what happened to you as a human being, what happened in the sky, what happened in the water, and all part of the nature is like a temple. The main temple is the nature. And so in my film, Ogun, you will see the representation of the Orisha in the forest.
Orisha is like the saint.
It's the saint, yes.
I think it's very interesting and very popular in Cuba.
It's very popular, yes, it's very popular.
Gloria, I have a question. You've devoted your life to research about the African diaspora and how the heritage of the diaspora that came to Cuba stayed and how formed our nationality. Why?
It's a very interesting question because I think that I am talking about the Cuban history. It's not separate from the Cuban nationality. Sometimes you could see the expression of the ex-slave, only in the folklore, only related with the dance, with the rumba, with the religious expression. But what about the social life? What about the contribution? What about the political idea? So this is something that I have been developing in my work, little by little, as part of the Institute of Cuban Film sometimes, but also I have to do this work as an independent filmmaker with my video group, Images of the Caribbean.
What's that? That's a very interesting project and has a lot of ideas and work. What is it exactly, Images of the Caribbean?
I founded this in the 90s, during the special period, during the time that the production of documentary almost disappeared because of the lack of resources. It was when I had this idea to do something related with African experience in Cuba. And the first documentary that I made at that time, it was not here in Havana. I asked why many black people in Cuba have British names and English names, Smiths, Browns, and many others. I knew a long time ago that we have people from Jamaica, but who really were these people? So in the middle of the special period, in the middle of the lack of many resources, I decided with a group of friends to go to Ciego de Ávila, the province of Ciego de Ávila, and stay in the batey in the town that belonged to an old sugar mill that is called Baragua. This sugar mill belonged to the Baragua Sugar Company, an American sugar company, and actually have another name. And I found a community that they are still speaking in English, they are still
Here in Cuba?
In Cuba, that they are still celebrating the 1st of August, so this emancipation party for the slave in the Caribbean area, that they have many plates and foods based with coconut, that they eat saltfish and ackee, that is something that is very common in the Caribbean. So I found a lot of tradition, and people, especially that their family, used to work at the Panama Canal, in the construction of the Panama Canal. And when the construction of Panama Canal finished, they didn't return to Barbados, Trinidad, they came to Cuba and worked around the sugar industry.
Gloria, are we aware of how Caribbean we are? Because we're closer to the continent because of the language. No, not geographically speaking, but do we know enough about the Caribbean?
We don't know enough about the Caribbean. We are a Caribbean island. We share with the Caribbean countries many things. And one of the topics that we get together is the migration. People from the Caribbean, they have to migrate from one place to another place. We have people in Cuba, from Jamaica, Trinidad and Tobago, Barbados, all the Caribbean, Montserrat, all the Caribbean countries, and Haitians, people from Cayman Island. And the work that I have been developing, one of the topics is exactly the migration between the Caribbean islands. So I made my FUPS test in Baragua, dedicated to people from Jamaica, Barbados, Trinidad, that arrived to Cuba. After I made another one that is people from Cayman Island that migrate to the Isle of Pine, that today we call Isle of Juice. Today, many people, they visit Cayman Island with a lot of hotel, richness, banks, but they don't remember the time that the Cayman Island was so poor that they have to migrate, and they migrate to Isle of Pine. And also at the same time, and we are talking about beginning of the 20th century, there were many people that migrate to different places of Haiti, especially from the south of Haiti, from Okai. A lot of people from Haiti migrate to Cuba, but all of them beginning of the 20th century.
You made a documentary about this, re-embarkation, which is the history of so many Haitians that came to Cuba.
Because you know, these people, they came around the production of the sugar mill. And the production of the sugar mill was related with the high prices of the sugar, sometimes high, sometimes down. After the First World War, it was a tremendous crisis of economic in the market, international market, and the low prices of the sugar. So it was a moment that they don't have the necessity to too much labor force that they have from Haiti and many other places. The Haitians arrive here in very terrible condition, without passport, without protection.
Like slaves.
Like a slave. Many historians talk about the reddition of the slavery system in Cuba in the 20th century. So when they don't need them anymore, they send them back to Haiti. but
Expel them.
yes,
Deportation.
and any kind of protection, security, and they hunt the people in the forest. And of course, La Guardia Rural, the rural guard that belong to the sugar mill, you know, they don't offer any kind of protection. They want the small houses that the Haitians have, the small properties, because we are talking about people that were living here from different years. So they didn't have any protection. And it's a chapter that I was able to reconstruct through the memory of those who were a child at that time and remember.
I would recommend that documentary because I think shows a part of our history absolutely unknown, and that's very serious. You haven't answered my question. You said once that you would never forget your grandmother's hands. That has to do with the fact that you devoted yourself to study the culture of the African diaspora?
Mira, I have to say something. I never met her because I started in the Institute of Film in 1976. Sarah Gomez made a documentary that the name is Chronicles of My Family. And in that documentary, she interviewed herself talking with Madrina, that was an old member of her family. And she wants to know about the history of the people that she have in the family photo. Who were these people? How was their life? That created a lot of influence on me. And I am following this kind of roots. So because it was a moment in my life when I am 61 now, but a moment in my life that I want to know more about my family. And they gave me tools, elements to continue the research around this black family, something that we don't know. As I said, we have the lack of presence of black people, not only here in Cuba, it happened in all the Latinos countries where there are a black population. Normally they present them only related with the religion, with the folklore, with the dance, with the music, but they never talk very much about the social, political contribution. How is the language inside a black family? There are some elements that are crucial. And for that reason, I want to make this documentary about my grandmother, her hands, because even with the process of the revolution, you need somebody that support the family. You need somebody that continue ironing, washing, in order that you could go to the school. Even you don't have to pay the school, and she was very proud about this during the process of the revolution, but you still need somebody at home that push, that say, you must study, you must do somebody in the society. And don't forget that you, as a black person, you need to make a big effort, much more than a white. This is something that we talk internally in our families, you know, because this society suffered slavery, and slavery marked and decide many prejudice that exists even today.
Even today.
Even today.
And how is
even
it
in Cuba.
expressed?
It's expressed in the projection of the images, who are in places that can make more money. In the prejudice, for example, sometimes in the TV, in the presentation of our culture. For example, now that we have the tourist industry, that you could see these ugly negritas, famous negritas with big eyes, red lips, with a melon. This is the reproduction of the minstrel company, the time that from United States appeared the minstrel company where the black cannot present ourselves, and they use white actors, paint the faces in black, and that's how they present the black people, humble, stupid, stereotype. And this is something that is still alive. And with the tourist industry in Cuba and in the rest of the Caribbean, in the Latinos country, it's a reproduction of the pattern.
Do you think that the revolution tackled this problem?
Not enough. I think that we still have to deal much more about the racial problem. Why do we discuss very much now about the sexual gender? Why not the racial problem? I think that because it's painful, it's still painful, and it's very deep. And not all the black people, they have the consciousness about the necessity to do this. Why? Because they ignore their own history. They don't know about our black leaders. They don't know about the contribution. They don't know, for example, that in Cuba exists a black political party, the Independent Party of Color. Why black people, they need a political party in 1908 after the process of the independence, after having fighting for 30 years, where we have people like Maceo, Guillermo
Were
Moncada,
black.
all of them, they were black. But what happened in the Republic?
Why did, enlighten us. What's the contribution of the black people to our history?
As I said, I am trying to present this through my films, but there are a lot of historians that they know about this. But when you try, to present the history of the black people, normally they don't try to present everything. They talk about the Mambises, the soldiers, those who fight during the process of the independence, but we don't talk about the black journalists, the black newspaper that exists, the contribution of the blacks to the education, the black nurses, how was possible during the Republic to becoming a doctor, to becoming a lawyer. It was a big struggle because it was a society divided in class and race. And don't forget the time, like in many parks, black people were only were allowed to walk on the border of the park, the mulattoes in the center, and the white close to the music. So this is something that happened during the Republic, and places where black were not admitted. Exist black society, white society, but the elimination of this kind of society didn't eliminate the racism. It's something that is still there, sometimes subtle, sometimes in one family, sometimes between black people, sometimes because they don't know anything in our school. So I don't think that we need to be scared about talking about this. I think that we can enrich the national history if we know very well what happened, especially in this beginning of the Republic, and the recognition of the contribution, the mistakes, and the problems of the Cuban society.
You said something which I think is very, very interesting, Gloria, that has to do with the fact that investigating about the African diaspora and about this religion and all that is not about Africa, it's about Cuba, and it's about our nationality. You don't believe in the term African Cuban? Like in United States, for example, there's an African American.
Okay.
We don't call it like that here.
Exacto.
We're all
One
Cubans.
of the discussions that I have when I travel to the United States is that they don't understand why black people, we call ourselves Cubans, because we have a sense of nationality. It's totally different than the United States, that they call themselves African Americans, but they don't feel that they are part of the nation. We are part of the nation because we follow those that Antonio Maceo said a long time ago. We don't want anything as black, but we want everything as Cuban. It's the biggest contribution, is to be part of the nation. We don't want to divide. For example, years ago, we have a book that is called Afro-Cubanas. It was the first time that it was published, a book dedicated to Afro-Cuban women, to black women in Cuba. Why? Because we need to break the stereotype that they were only slaves, because even in the slavery time, they were fighting for the family, they were fighting for their rights, they get the freedom to their children, and that's how it was created, the black bourgeoisie, a people that were escaped from the slavery, not only the Maroon, they escaped from the slavery and they organized a society as the people who made the clothes, selling in the street, musicians. Sometimes we talk about the development of Cuban music and we don't consider the contribution of the black people in our
Which is essential.
That the main orchestra of the danzón and many other places, it was the black people who were there, because to play music, it was considered something that you only made with your hands, so that belonged to black people, you know?
I think this is so interesting, Gloria, but it's only one of the topics that you could talk about. And there's another part of the interview which I cannot avoid asking about. You're a movie maker. You're a woman director. There are not a lot of women directors here in Cuba.
We are some. We have some. You are a director also. We have some, but it was a big challenge because we never have this kind of support in the Institute of Film to create a space for women to direct. They said, in theory, that everybody have the same right, the same possibility, but it was not the truth. With the time, I think that we had to gain our own space. In the moment that the video technology appeared in Cuba, it was the moment that many of us, we try, to abandon the film and go to the world of the video. And that happened in the 90s. In the 90s, because I made my first documentary, Ogun, in 1991. And at the same time, Marina Ochoa and many others, they start, we have a section like Belkis Vega that was doing some work, and Teresita, and many others, but not many, and also I think that the majority, they have been doing their work in video.
You have another experience, a pioneering experience, I believe, the fact that you've made independent movies, actually, for real, independent movies.
See, a big challenge.
You like challenge.
A big
challenge.
I mean,
you're a woman, you're black, and that's an obstacle in our society.
Sometimes people, they don't understand why the topics of my films is related with black people. When I answer, do you know this segment of the Cuban history? No. So I am not only doing something for black people, to black people, for the nation, to try to understand the complexity of the Cuban history.
So I imagine that you've accomplished, it's a challenge, but you've accomplished so much, Gloria. I mean, being a woman, being black, living in Cuba, finding money, doing independent movie, trying to pay that debt.
Yes.
Because it's a debt.
Yes.
With the culture, with the heritage that we don't know enough, that we don't learn at schools. I mean, I've discovered a lot through your work, and I thank you for that. So I imagine.
But I enjoy to do this. It's a commitment.
You feel that you've success, I imagine.
I am not worried about this. I need to enjoy. I need to learn, because when I am doing this work, I am learning. I discover a lot of things. Maybe I don't have too much connection with the rest of the filmmaker, but my friends and the people that I talk is historians, the people that work with the Cuban history, and I enjoy very much this. So for me, it's not a sacrifice. It's a pleasure. Every time that I find something, and I discover another step, another history, and I would like, what I would like? To have a group of people working with me, a group of young journalists, being black or white, it doesn't matter. That will be interesting, because I think that we need to create a group to study much more our history. I think that we have a lack of people that take care of the Cuban history in documentaries. Well, we don't have too many, but I think that this is something that we need to promote much more. And I will be in the best position and this position to help.
The idea of defending the black heritage and black culture doesn't
and the Cuban
mean,
history.
And the Cuban history doesn't mean that you have a problem with white people.
I don't think so. Bueno, if somebody have a problem with me, have a problem
Those who consider themselves white, because neither of us are.
Bueno, it's their problem, not my problem. I don't have
but
a problem with it.
It's not a problem.
It's not a problem for me. I do my work, and I know that every time that some people see my work, they learn something. And I belong to that school.
That's your obsession?
Yes.
To teach?
Yes.
About that unknown history?
Exacto.
Not to be forgotten?
Exacto.
Thank you very much, Gloria.
Okay.
It's been such a pleasure. Thank you.
You're welcome. Thank you.